الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين وبعد. Today is Saturday, the 28th, the 29th of Dhul-Hijjah, 1434, corresponding to the 5th of October, 2013. We begin with the 13th lesson of the book Attahqeeq Wal Iydaah by Sheikh Abdul Aziz ibn Abdullah ibn Baz rahimahullah ta'ala. A woman who menstruates or has postpartum bleeding after assuming Ihram for Umrah does not perform tawaf around the house, nor between Safa and Marwa until she becomes pure. Once that occurs, she can then perform tawaf and sa'i and cut her hair. At this point, she has completed her Umrah. However, if her menses or postpartum bleeding does not stop before the 8th day, she assumes Ihram for Hajj from the place of her residence. She then heads to Mina, and with that she becomes a qarina, i.e. the one that combines between Hajj and Umrah. She does what a Haji does, i.e. stays in Arafah and in Muzdalifah and stones the Jamrat al-Aqaba. She also spends the night in Muzdalifah, sacrifices her sacrificial animal, and cuts her hair. When her menses or postpartum bleeding ends, she can then perform tawaf and sa'i. She only performs one sa'i and one tawaf.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah waliyyu salihin. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluhu sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathiran ila yawm ad-din. Amma ba'd. The author rahimahullah ta'ala mentioned yesterday that the person who performs tawaf and sa'i and then cuts their hair comes out of the state of Ihram. And at that point, for the person who is mutamattir, that is, they're performing Hajj tamattu', they go down, they make Umrah. After performing the Umrah and cutting their hair, then they are now out of the state of Ihram, and they can do everything that they were doing previous or prior to going into the state of Ihram. He says, except for a woman who is experiencing her menses or postpartum bleeding. Except for a woman who is on her menses or experiencing postpartum bleeding. This happens to all of the daughters of Adam, so people need to pay attention because all women experience this at one point or another, unless they have gone through menopause. So at this point, the author rahimahullah ta'ala says that if her period comes on after she assumes Ihram for Umrah, then she cannot make tawaf, nor can she make sa'i. And that is because sa'i must be preceded by a valid tawaf. I mean, there is no such thing as just making sa'i without the sa'i having been preceded by tawaf. And so, since this woman cannot make tawaf, then she also cannot make sa'i. And the Prophet ﷺ, this actually happened to Aisha, radiyallahu ta'ala anha, who after assuming Ihram from Dhul-Hijjah, her period came on. And so, this was before they actually made it to Mecca. Her period came on the 3rd of Dhul-Hijjah, and the Muslims didn't make it to Mecca until the 4th of Dhul-Hijjah. So she wasn't able to make Hajj with everyone else. And the Prophet ﷺ told her, do everything that the rest of the pilgrims are doing, except that you should not make tawaf until you are in a state of purity. Until you reach a state of purity. So she's not going to make tawaf, nor is she going to make sa'i. Once her menses goes off, she stops menstruating, or the blood of the postpartum blood stops, then she will go on to perform tawaf and sa'i, and she will cut her hair after performing tawaf and sa'i. And at that point, her umrah is complete, and she becomes halal again. And that is, she comes out of the state of Ihram. The author, rahimahullah, goes on to say, however, in the case of a woman whose menses comes on and does not go off before the day of Tarwiyah. The day of Tarwiyah is the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah. So if her menses doesn't go off before the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah, then he says that at this point she is to make the intention of performing Hajj. And that is either by saying labbaik Allahumma hajjan, because she's already made ihram for Umrah. So she can say labbaik Allahumma hajjan, and then it becomes Hajj and Umrah, or she can say labbaik Allahumma hajjan wa umratan, because it's the same meaning, that she is making ihram for both Hajj and Umrah. Either one is okay because it carries the same meaning. And then she will become what is known as Qarina. Yani Hajj al-Qiran. That means that a person has combined between both Hajj and Umrah. She has to combine between her Hajj and Umrah because she doesn't have enough time to perform the Umrah before the day of Arafah. Alright, so at this point, she becomes Qarina. And she is going to do everything that the rest of the Hujjaj are doing. She goes to Mina on the 8th, Arafah on the 9th, and then to Muzdalifah, and then she stones the Jamratul Aqaba. She cuts her hair. Likewise, she slaughters her animal, her sacrificial animal. Once she becomes pure, once her menses goes off and she becomes pure again, or in the state of ritual purity, then at that point, she makes tawaf and sa'i. That tawaf and that sa'i count for both Hajj and Umrah. They count for both Hajj and it counts for her Umrah, because at this point she is Qarina, so she has merged between her Hajj and her Umrah. So she only has to make one tawaf and one sa'i. That tawaf that she's making is tawaf al-Ifadah, or tawaf al-Hajj, or tawaf al-Ziyarah. That is the tawaf that she's making, and it counts for the tawaf of her Umrah, and she makes a sa'i for Hajj, and that counts as the sa'i for her Umrah as well, so she gets the reward of both the Hajj and Umrah.
The proof for this is the hadith of Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, that she menstruated after assuming Ihram, and the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to her, "If'ali ma yaf'alu al-hajj, if'ali ma yaf'alu al-hajj, غير أن لا تطوفي بالبيت حتى تطهري." متفق عليه. Do everything that a Haji does, but do not perform tawaf around the house until you become pure. Collected by Bukhari and Muslim. Women who have postpartum bleeding or menses can partially come out of Ihram on the 9th day after having stoned and cut their hair. On the 10th day after having stoned and cut their hair. Everything that was impermissible while in the state of Ihram is now permissible, i.e. perfume, etc. However, at this point, they're still not to have any intimate relations with their spouses until they perform tawaf and sa'i.
In other words, a woman who is on her menses on the 10th day of Dhul-Hijjah, which is also known as Yom al-Nahr, she is going to do everything that the rest of the Hujjaj are doing. So she's going to go stone the Jamratul Aqaba, the large pillar, if you will. And after that, she's going to slaughter her animal, and she's going to cut her hair. At this point, anyone performing Hajj, whether it is a woman on her menses or any other woman or man for that matter, anyone who does 2 out of 3 things on the day of the 10th, yani Yom al-Nahr, anyone who does 2 out of 3 things experiences a partial release from the restrictions of Ihram. Alright, just so that that's clear, on the 10th day, Yom al-Nahr, okay, you're going to pray Fajr where? All of you are making Hajj. I'm assuming that you at least know what you're supposed to do on each day. Somebody on this side. The 10th day, what do you do? Where are you praying Salatul Fajr? In Muzdalifah? what they call maghrib qamar, yani after the moon, after you cannot see the moon anymore, which is after 2/3 of the night. We'll talk about that in an upcoming lesson, inshallah ta'ala. But yani assuming that you are staying in Muzdalifah, then on the 10th day, yani on the day of the 10th, when you wake up, you're going to pray Fajr in Muzdalifah. And then from Muzdalifah, you will move to Mina. On Mina, you will stone, you will slaughter, cut your hair, and then from the actions of the 10th as well is to go to Mecca and make Tawaf al-Ifadah. To go to the Kaaba and make Tawaf al-Ifadah, and if you need to make sa'i, then make sa'i afterwards. Okay? The point is that 3 of these things are related to what is known as tahallul. Tahallul means to be released from the restrictions of Ihram. And as we know, the restrictions of Ihram, there are 9. There are 9 things that are prohibited for you to do in Ihram. So once you do 2 of the 3 things, those 3 things are stoning, cutting your hair, and making Tawaf al-Ifadah. The slaughter has nothing to do with at-tahallul. The slaughter has nothing to do with being released from the restrictions of Ihram. So it's one of these 3 things. That is, 2, stoning, cutting your hair, and making Tawaf. The author, rahimahullah ta'ala, says that once she stones and cuts her hair, she is now released from Ihram, a minor release from Ihram. That is, everything is permissible except for intimate relations with her spouse. Likewise, the same applies for a man. So a man who does 2 of the 3 things, then everything becomes permissible for him again, except for intimate relations with his spouse. Once all 3 things are done, that is, stoning, cutting the hair, and making Tawaf, and if you need to make sa'i, then the sa'i as well after the Tawaf, then you are totally out of the state of Ihram. That's called At-Tahallul Al-Akbar. You are released totally from Ihram. So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, is just mentioning here that this is also the case for a woman who has experienced her menses or postpartum bleeding.
Once they do that, they then can fully come out of Ihram, and at that point everything is permissible for them, even having intimate relations with their spouses.
Right, so once a person has made Tawaf and sa'i, after stoning and cutting the hair, then everything becomes permissible again.
Chapter, assuming Ihram for Hajj on the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah and going to Mina.
Alright, so now the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, has finished talking about Umrah. So anyone who is making Hajj Tamattu, obviously they're going to start off with Umrah. They're going to assume Ihram from the Miqat, and then they are going to go to Mecca. They're going to make Tawaf and sa'i and the things that we detailed, cut their hair, and then they will be out of Ihram. They stay in Mecca and they wait until the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah. On the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah, what do they do?
On the day of Talbiyah, which is the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah, it is desirable for the people of Mecca and those residing therein who intend to perform Hajj to assume Ihram for Hajj from their residence. This is because the companions assumed Ihram from an Abqa, which is where they were residing on the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah due to the Prophet's command. He sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not instruct them to go to the Kaaba or the Mizab, the spout at the top of the Kaaba, to assume Ihram. Likewise, he did not instruct them to make Tawaf, al-Wada', when they left for Mina. Had this been legislated, the Prophet ﷺ would have encouraged the companions to do so, and all good is in following the Prophet ﷺ and his companions.
So the author, rahimahullah ta'ala, goes on to talk about what the Hajj is going to do, or the Hajji is going to do, on the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah. The 8th of Dhul-Hijjah, he starts off by saying that it's called Yom at-Tarwiyah. And Tarwiyah means to fill oneself up with drink. And the reason why it's called Yom at-Tarwiyah is because Mina did not used to have any source of water. Or it didn't have wells or any other source of water. So everyone who was in Mecca and was going to make Hajj, meaning that they would have to go to Mina and then Arafah, they would take their fill of water, they would drink, and then they would fill up their water skins that they had with them and take enough for them to have to make wudu or that they would need to drink, or that they would need to cook their food while they were making the Hajj, until they would go back to Mecca on the 10th. المشايخ كثر مشايخ تتمتع بالعمرة إن شاء الله. His question, just so that you know, he said we're making Ihram, or we want to make tamattu from, and we want to make Ihram from Dhul-Hijjah here. Abdul Ali is the common folk call it. What should we make Ihram for? What should we say? The answer is that you make Ihram for Umrah. If you're making Hajj and tamattu, when you leave from Medina, your intention is that you're making Umrah. And then you'll make intentions for Hajj on the 8th day, like we're talking about right now. So anyway, so it's called Yom Talbiyah, all right, because they would take their fill of water on that day, and then they would head to Mina. The one who wants to perform Hajj, this is a question that comes over and over again. Some people think that they have to go back out to a miqat. Other people think they need to go to Tan'im. Some people think that they need to go to the Kaaba and assume Ihram from the Kaaba. As the author mentioned, there is a false belief that is widespread, and that is that you have to make Ihram from under the mizab at the Kaaba, with the spout. That spout where if it rains, it actually drains the rain off the roof of the Kaaba. None of this is correct. And the Prophet ﷺ instructed his companions to make Ihram from where they were staying. They were staying in Al-Abtah, which is to the west of Mina. It's a place in between Mecca and Mina, but it's closer to Mina. And all of the mashayikh, Mina, Arafah, Muzdalifah, all of this to the east of Mecca. All right, so Al-Abtah likewise is to the east of Mecca. This is where the companions were staying after they performed Umrah, when they first came to Mecca on the 4th of Dhul-Hijjah. Then after that, then they stayed in Al-Abtah. And so the Prophet ﷺ instructed them to make Ihram from where they were. So on the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah, for everyone who is residing in Mecca, whether you are from the people of Mecca or whether you have come from the outside and you have made Umrah and now you are halal and you have come out of the state of Ihram and you are staying in Mecca, you will perform, or you will assume Ihram from wherever you happen to be in Mecca. Whether it is your hotel, or you're staying in a furnished apartment, or wherever you may happen to be, you will assume Ihram for Hajj. On the 8th day, wherever you may be, you do not have to go anywhere. Because had that been something good, to go somewhere else, whether it was to the Kaaba or outside of the Haram area or whatever, that the Prophet ﷺ would have instructed his companions to do so. But he didn't instruct them to do so. And they were more keen on doing that which was good than anyone who came after them. So had it been any good, the Prophet ﷺ would have instructed them to do so.
It is mustahab to bathe, remove unwanted hair and nails, and apply fragrance to the body as one does when assuming Ihram from the miqat.
So when the person assumes Ihram on the 8th day, what is he going to say? He's going to say Labbaik Allahumma Hajjan, or Labbaik Hajjan, or Labbaik Hajja, anything along these lines. First, he has intention in his heart to enter the rites and to perform the Hajj, and then he says Labbaik Allahumma Hajjan. The same thing that he did when assuming Ihram from the miqat for Umrah is the same thing that he's going to do before assuming Ihram on the 8th day of Dhul-Hijjah. So it is mustahab for him, it is desirable for him to take a ghusl, alright, to bathe. And likewise, if there is any unwanted hair or nails that needs to be removed, then that is to be done except for the beard, as the author rahimahullah ta'ala stressed on a number of occasions, because it is never permissible to take anything from the beard unless it is below a fistful, as we dealt with at its appropriate time in the book. And he is also to apply scent or oil or fragrance like he would do when he was assuming ihram from the miqat.
After assuming ihram for Hajj, it is the sunnah to head to Mina before midday or slightly thereafter on the day of Tarwiyah. One should recite the Talbiyah abundantly from the time he assumes ihram until stoning the Jamratul Aqaba.
Now, the Talbiyah, again, when a person assumed ihram from the miqat, and he took off his normal clothes and he put on the he put on the garments of ihram, and he begins to head towards Mecca, it is the sunnah for him to recite abundantly, or to say abundantly the Talbiyah. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, inna alhamda wa ni'mata laka wal mulk, la sharika. And as I mentioned before, and I don't think that it's a bad thing actually to repeat it. When a person assumes ihram, he should remember death. And the Prophet ﷺ, as it comes in numerous hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, أَكْثِرُ مِنْ ذِكْرِ هَذِهِ اللَّذَّاتِ. Yani, remember that which destroys pleasures. Remember it abundantly. Remember death. Think about it. Because that is the one thing that every human can agree on. Allah Azza wa Jalla said, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ. That every soul will taste death. What happens after death? There is great dispute amongst the people of earth. Even amongst people that claim to follow the same religion, they may differ amongst themselves as to what happens after death. And alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Allah Azza wa Jalla has detailed for us in the Quran, and the Prophet ﷺ has detailed in his sunnah that which happens after death. So the Muslim is upon clarity about what happens after death. But the point is here that a person should remember death. Because today you can do your actions and there is no final account for them. And tomorrow you will be held accountable and you will not be able to do any more actions. And so it's critical that a person remember that often so that he prepares for it. You need to prepare for the inevitable. When you know something is going to happen, subhanAllah, I mean, just think about it. A person who believes, for example, 70% chance of rain. You listen to the news and they say there's a 70% chance of rain. And you look outside and it's cloudy and it looks kind of dreary. What do most people do? They prepare for rain. Even if it's not raining at that particular time. They take an umbrella with them. They wear a type of clothes that are appropriate to deal with the rain. If you know that there's a 100% chance of something happening, then it means even more so you should prepare for that. Death is real. And death is something that we should remember. And when you take off those clothes and you take off your normal clothes and you put on the white garments, there's nothing in life that resembles what happens at death more so than that. More so than a person who is being shrouded after having died. His normal clothes are removed from him. He is shrouded and prepared to be buried. Likewise, the person who is entering into ihram takes off his normal clothes, washes himself. When he dies, he is washed. He bathes. He applies scent. When he dies, someone else applies the scent to him, the fragrance to him. And he puts on the garments. And when he dies, someone else wraps him in those same garments. So at this time, remember that you are traveling, that you are a traveler. Not just that you are a traveler to Saudi Arabia or to Mecca, but that you are traveling towards Allah Azza wa Jalla. And use the time to prepare. Take provisions with you. On every journey that you go on, you take provisions with you. You fill up a suitcase with something, they're your essentials. The essential for your journey to Allah Azza wa Jalla is at-taqwa. Is that you fear Allah Azza wa Jalla, that you do what He commanded you to do and you stay away from His prohibitions. And this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the context of talking about Hajj, He says, what tazawwadu, bring provisions with you. Talking about the dunya. Talking about the dunya, what tazawwadu. Don't come to Hajj without any provisions, claiming that you have tawakkul upon Allah Azza wa Jalla, and then you stick out your hand and you ask people for this and for that. You don't have a ticket to get back to your country, please, can you donate some money? Like you will see, Allah understand. Tazawwadu, bring provisions with you. وَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الزَّادِ التَّقْوَى. But the best provision is the provision of taqwa. On that journey towards Allah Azza wa Jalla. These are things, when you reassume Ihram for the 8th, don't forget these things. Don't forget that it is now, again, and some of the Mashaykh, rahimahumullah, wa hafidha man baqi minhum, some of them mention in their books, when they talk about the issue of Ihram, that now everyone is the same from the outside. And that is why it is time to reflect on the inside, to reflect on the heart, to remember that Allah Azza wa Jalla doesn't look at your outer appearances, but that He looks at your heart and your actions. And to keep this in mind as you prepare for Hajj on the day of the 8th.
The Haji should pray Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, and Fajr at Mina. The Sunnah is to offer each prayer at its fixed. The Sunnah is to offer each prayer at its fixed time in shortened form, except for Fajr and Maghrib.
Likewise, the author rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that the Haji should be making the Talbiyah from the time that he assumes Ihram, and he does not stop until he stones on the 10th day. Like, what day does he go into Ihram? What day is it? It's the 8th. So he's going to be making Talbiyah for 48 hours approximately, that time period, for 2 days. When does he stop making Talbiyah? On Arafah, the Prophet ﷺ is not reported that he made Talbiyah. It's reported that he had his hands raised. Basically from the time he finished making Salat al-Dhuhr wal Asr on Arafah, all the way until Maghrib, all the way until sunset. But anyway, it is especially the Sunnah to make the Talbiyah when one is moving from place to place. So when you are going from wherever your residence is, wherever you assume that to Mina, then you should be making the Talbiyah. And when you go from Mina to Arafah, make the Talbiyah. And from Arafah to Muzdalifah, make the Talbiyah. From Muzdalifah back to Mina, make the Talbiyah until you saw Al-Jamalatul Aqaba. And again, when you pronounce these words, the Talbiyah, Ikhwan, think about the meaning of what you're saying. What does labbaik mean? What does that mean? When do we say labbaik? Labbaik means that I am answering your call. I am answering your call. In other words, it is as we would say in English, when someone calls you, they say, come here. When you want to be polite, you say, I am at your service. This is the closest way that you could think of labbaik. It means that you are at the service of Allah Azza wa Jalla. You are answering His call over and over and over again. You are answering the call that He taught to Ibrahim when He told him, وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ, and call out to the people, call out to them to make Hajj. When Ibrahim called out, there was no one to hear the call. But Allah Azza wa Jalla spread the call Himself and allowed the people to hear that call to make the Hajj. And you who have come from faraway lands to come to Mecca to perform the Hajj have answered that call. So you say labbaik. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Labbaik la sharika laka labbaik. So you repeat labbaik 4 times. Here I am, answering the call, at your service. And likewise, the Talbiyah carries the meaning of La ilaha illallah. So it carries that meaning of affirming that worship is for Allah Azza wa Jalla alone, that you are here to serve him and to serve him alone. La sharika lak. And you have no partner, no associate. There is no one that I am serving other than you, Ya Rabbil Alameen. This is what you are saying when you say labbaik Allahumma labbaik. So you are affirming what you were created for, which is the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And many of us believe that we were created for worship, for worshiping Allah. And that is correct to an extent. But you need to add something. And that is that you were created to worship Allah alone. Because the mushrikun, who the Prophet ﷺ was sent to, they worshipped Allah. And we shouldn't let that skip our minds. They worshipped Allah, but what made them mushrikun was that they did not worship Allah alone. And so the Muslim is one who has been guided by Allah Azza wa Jal to declare the oneness of Allah and to single him out in his worship. Now, then the author rahimahullah ta'ala, and think about these meanings. When you are saying labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, and translate it into your lives. When you worship Allah alone, and it is time for prayer, you're not embarrassed to pray. It doesn't matter what else is going on. It doesn't matter whether you're at work or at school or... No. Because I worship Allah Azza wa Jalla alone. Wallah Azza wa Jalla yudafi'u 'anil ladhina amanu. Also in Surah Al-Hajj, also when talking about Hajj, Allah is the one that protects those who believe. So you don't have any shame in practicing your deed. When a command comes to you from Allah Azza wa Jalla, or from the one who he sent to mankind, that is Muhammad ibn Abdullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then you implement that command because you don't worship anybody else. And because you don't worship anyone else, then quite frankly it doesn't matter what they think. And when you die and you stand in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla, they will not be able to help you. And so these meanings need to come when you declare in that Talbiyah that you are answering the call of Allah and you worship him alone, that this translates into every aspect of your life and it stays with you after Hajj. Because you recognize that this is what you were created for. And that everything else is secondary. And so the pilgrim, when he is on Mina, and he goes there on the 8th day, he prays Dhuhr, and Asr, and Maghrib, and Isha, and then the next day he prays Fajr. That is the day of the night, day of Arafah. He prays Fajr there. He prays all of these Salah at their affixed times. That means he does not combine them. But he does shorten the prayers that have 4 units, or 4 rakats. That is Dhuhr and Asr and Isha. So he prays them short, but he prays every prayer at its affixed, appropriate time.
But the prayers should not be combined. There's no difference between the people of Mecca and others on this count. Because the Prophet ﷺ led everyone, including the people of Mecca, in prayer at Mina, Arafah, and Muzdalifah. He ﷺ shortened the prayers, but did not instruct anyone praying behind him ﷺ to complete their prayers. Had it been mandatory for them to do so, he ﷺ would have clarified that.
The author rahimahullah ta'ala, he goes on to say that there is no difference between the people of Mecca and other than them when it comes to what we just talked about, which is shortening the prayers. That is, everyone on Mina is to shorten their prayers, to pray Dhuhr as 2 rakats, to pray Asr as 2 rakats, and to pray Al-Isha as 2 rakats. Not just Mina, but also on Arafah and Muzdalifah, and throughout the rites. And he says that this is because the Prophet ﷺ led everyone in prayer. Everyone prayed behind the Prophet ﷺ. And he didn't make a distinction between the people of Mecca and other than them. He didn't, after the Salah, say, for the people of Mecca, continue your prayers. And this is the opinion of madhab of the Malikis, and it is the opinion of Sheikh Tahir Wyatt, rahimahullah ta'ala, and the opinion of the author. However, the majority of scholars, that is the Hanafiya and the Shafi'iyya and the Hanabila as well, the Hanbalis, do not hold this opinion to be correct. That is that the people of Mecca must complete their prayers. And they must complete their prayers. That's the opinion of Ibn Allah as well, to be safe for the people of Mecca. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best what is correct as it relates to this opinion. But to assume that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam led everyone in prayer is an assumption that needs dalil. Is an assumption that needs evidence in and of itself. Because as we know, the people who made Hajj with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam were more than 100,000. More than 100,000. I mean, some of the scholars say up to 120,000. And to think that, and at that time, obviously, there were no microphones, there were no, these type of things. To think that everyone prayed behind the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam needs evidence. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. And in the event there's two valid opinions amongst the people of knowledge, one of them appears to be stronger than the other. And at the end of the day, inshallah ta'ala, none of you have to worry about that. Because none of you, Allahu a'lam, are from the people of Mecca. So if you're not from the people of Mecca, then without a doubt you're going to only make 2 rak'ahs for the prayers that are normally 4 rak'ahs.
After sunrise on the day of Arafah, i.e. the 9th of Dhul-Hijjah, the Haji leaves Mina and heads toward Arafah. It is the sunnah to rest at Namira until midday if possible.
Before we begin to discuss in detail what happens on the day of Arafah, there are some things that we should all be aware of as it relates to the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah. The first thing is that there is consensus amongst the scholars of Islam, all of them, that the 8th, that staying at Mina on the 8th of Dhul-Hijjah is not wajib. It's not obligatory. Nor is it a pillar from the pillars of Hajj, and an essential matter that must be done for one's Hajj to be considered valid. So if a person does not go to Mina on the 8th, then their Hajj will still be valid, provided that they go to Arafah at its correct time and that they do the other essential matters of the Hajj. That being said, a person should not intentionally stay away from Mina on the 8th, because it is the sunnah of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and those who followed him to go to Mina on the 8th. That is the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, it's not wajib, and this consensus has been mentioned by Ibn Abdul and Nawawi and others. But it is important for the Hajji to understand the fiqh of ibadah. A lot of times we hear about fiqh of whatever. The fiqh of salah, meaning that you need to know what the conditions of salah are. You need to understand those things that are obligatory for you to do in your salah, the pillars of salah to them. And that is very important in and of itself. But ibadah as a whole has fiqh. It needs to be understood. And I'll give you an example, and hopefully the example of Hajj will become clear by this example. What is the most important night of the year, the most blessed night of the year? Laylatul Qadr. Allah Azza wa Jal revealed an entire surah talking about Laylatul Qadr. Laylatul Qadri khayrun min alfi shahr. That the night of Al-Qadr is better than 1,000 months. That worship that is performed therein is better than the worship that one could perform in 1,000 months. How many nights in Ramadan before Laylatul Qadr? 26. Yani Laylatul Qadr is on the 27th of Ramadan? At least 20. And we'll stop there. Because Laylatul Qadr is one of the last 10 nights of Ramadan, and not necessarily the 27th. It's one of the last 10 nights. So there are at least 20 nights of Ramadan before Laylatul Qadr. And that means that you have 20 days of fasting and 20 nights of prayer, for the one who is pushing himself, before Laylatul Qadr comes. Laylatul Qadr is the goal. Is the goal. It is the goal of every Muslim to worship Allah Azza wa Jalla on that night. To try to increase his good deeds on the scale so that they will outweigh the evil deeds. Allah Azza wa Jalla provides us with a warm-up period. In other words, you push yourself, you get used to the ibadah that needs to be done, and then there are the last 10 nights. So the time that you are actually preparing is 20 days and 20 nights, and the time that you are striving, the actual race, if you will, is 10 nights. 10 days and 10 nights. So the preparation is longer than the actual time that you are, than the goal in and of itself. And that is from the fiqh of ibadah, that a person prepare himself for what the goal is. Look at salah. Is there a difference, and you will recognize this in yourself? When you go to the masjid early, when the adhan is being called or slightly thereafter, and you pray 2 rak'ats, and then after you pray 2 rak'ats, you read the Quran or you make dua, and then the iqamah for whatever fard salat there is called. And then you pray that fard salat. Is there a difference in the khushu' that you have in that salat as opposed to the one that you come in while the iqamah is being called? Or the imam has already made takbiratul ihram, or he made ruku', you're trying to catch the ruku', or is there a difference or not? There's a difference, without a doubt. Without a doubt, every Muslim knows this from himself, that it feels different. The khushu' why? Because you prepared for the ibadah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla, for all of these ibadah, He gives us prep time. There's the adhan, and then there is some time that allows you to prepare for the ibadah itself. That main ibadah. What is the main ibadah of Hajj? What did the Prophet say? Al-Hajj wal Arafah. Al-Hajj Arafah. Arafah is the 9th day. Imagine the difference between a person who has assumed Ihram on the morning of the 8th, like the Prophet ﷺ did. And he's making the Talbiyah. Labbaik Allahumma labbaik. And he feels this in his heart. And he gets to Mina after 2 or 3 hours, and he's looking at all of these people who have come to worship Allah Azza wa Jalla, and he realized how insignificant his worship is. And how it means absolutely that Allah Azza wa Jalla is not in need of him. And that if he dies, there are millions of other Muslims that are doing exactly the same thing that he did, performing Hajj and making Talbiyah. How many more billion Muslims around the world constantly worshiping Allah Azza wa Jalla, recognize him, and then he realizes that, subhanAllah, it is me, I am the one that needs this ibadah, not that Allah Azza wa Jalla needs something from me. I need this for the purification of my own soul. And then he goes and he's on Mina. And while he's on Mina, he's using his time wisely. He's memorizing adhkar. He's memorizing dua that he wants to say when he's on Arafah. He's listening to the people of knowledge who may be with him to try to learn more about his deen. He's praying in jama'ah with the Muslims. He himself is also making his own dhikr and adhkar besides the ones that he wants to memorize for the next day. He's reciting the Quran. He is preparing himself. He prays Fajr. at Mina on the 9th of Dhul-Hijjah, and after Fajr he makes Adhkar al-Sabah, and he remembers Allah Azza wa Jalla until the sun rises, and then he heads towards Arafah. At this point, he recognizes now he is broken in front of Allah Azza wa Jalla, broken before Allah, totally submissive and totally humble. The difference between that person and the person who is relaxing in his hotel on the 8th, and he says, the scholars have ijma', that is just sunnah, by the way, to go to Mina on the 8th. And inshallah, tomorrow when I wake up, I'll make a ghusl, and I'll put on the Ihram, and I'll head to Arafah. Is there a difference or not? There's a difference. It's like the difference of the one who, when he hears the Iqamah, he's rushing to the Salah. It takes him some time to get adjusted. Well, let's look at something else. Arafah is only from Dhuhr until Maghrib. And part of the time, the beginning time, there is the khutbah, there's the sunnah, and then there is salat of Dhuhr, and then salat al-Asr. So how many hours really does he have to make dua on that day? Maybe 4.5, something like this. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, but anyway, somewhere around it, 5 hours. But the prep time is longer. Your prep time is more than 24 hours to get yourself ready for that day that Aisha narrated, that the Prophet ﷺ said that there is no day that Allah frees more of his servants from the hellfire than the day of Arafah. There is no day of the year that Allah Azza wa Jalla frees more of his slaves from the fire than the day of Arafah. And Allah Azza wa Jalla comes close on that day in a manner that is befitting to him. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّهُ لِيَدْنُ, that Allah Azza wa Jalla comes close. And he looks at the people of Arafah and he boasts about them to his angels. They have come to me dusty and disheveled. What is it that they want? They just want Allah Azza wa Jalla to forgive them. And Allah Azza wa Jalla frees his slaves on that day more than any other day, and there is no day, as the Prophet ﷺ said, that Shaitan is more humiliated than on the day of Arafah, except for what happened on the day of Badr. There's no day that the Shaitan is more humiliated. And so the Muslim uses the 8th to prepare for the 9th. Understand this, Ikhwan, and spread it. Spread it to the people that you know, that may be with you on your Hajj group. The other people that are with your Hajj group, that may be on the bus with you, that may be in the tent with you, because there are too many people who do not use the 8th wisely. Either because they don't even go to Mina, or because they are on Mina and it's become a camping trip. There's a tent and sleeping mats, and people begin to just run their mouths about things and talk about things that are not beneficial whatsoever. And remember that the 8th is one of the 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah, the best days of the year. And so a person needs to use that time wisely, reciting the Quran, reminding one another of the rights of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, making dhikr, making dua, something beneficial, listening to a beneficial lecture, something that is beneficial, reading a book, but not using the time in a manner that is unbefitting of one who is seeking the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jalla, and one who is preparing to stand before Allah on that great day of Arafah. And if you can have an effect on the believers that are around you by by reminding them of the virtue of these 10 days, or that day, the first day of Hajj, and the importance, then you will also get the reward of whatever they do that is khair, whatever they do that is good on those days. You will also get that reward. And that is part of commanding with good and forbidding the evil.
After sunrise on the day of Arafah, i.e. the 9th of Dhul-Hijjah, the Haji leaves Mina and heads towards Arafah. It is the sunnah to rest at Namira until midday if possible, due to the fact that the Prophet ﷺ did so.
So we'll deal with the day of Arafah tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, and take the questions that you have.
جزاكم الله خيرا وبارك الله فيكم ونفع الله بما قلتم. This questioner says, I've heard that when you see the Kaaba for the first time, your first dua will get accepted.
Alhamdulillah. The issue of one's dua being accepted is something that needs to have something that comes from Allah Azza wa Jalla, or the Messenger of Allah. Because the dua being accepted is not something that is tangible that you can see, or something that you can smell or hear or taste. In other words, it's not something, the only way that you can know that is that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam informed us of that. And there is no authentic hadith that I am aware of that mentions that it is that the first time you see the Kaaba, that the dua that you make is accepted. And it is also, there is nothing that I am aware of also, when you look through the books of that deal with the manasik or the rites of Hajj, anything narrated authentically on the Prophet ﷺ that he would see upon seeing the Kaaba. Other than that, he would say Allahu Akbar when beginning his tawaf. As for the companions, then it is authentic that Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when he would first see the Kaaba, and not his first time seeing the Kaaba. And it's important to note, they saw the Kaaba before they were Muslims. Those Muslims, the early ones, they saw the Kaaba before they were Muslims. And they saw the Kaaba many other times after that. So the issue of seeing the Kaaba for the first time, no, when they would enter Masjid al-Haram, when Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu would see the Kaaba, upon entering the Masjid, he would say, Allahumma anta salam, minka salam, fahayyina, rabbana bis salam. Other than that, dua, I don't know anything authentically reported on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam or his companions.
A woman who has her period just before performing Tawaf al-Ifadah, should she wait till it's over and then perform the Tawaf? However, if she is about to leave Mecca and cannot postpone...
Let me answer the first part of the question. Should she make Tawaf? No, she should not make Tawaf. If her menses comes on Arafah, for example, which I'm assuming what they mean when they say right before Tawaf al-Ifadah, because Tawaf al-Ifadah would be on the 10th. If her menses comes on Arafah or any time before Tawaf al-Ifadah, then she must wait until her menses goes off so that she can perform Tawaf al-Ifadah. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha, do not do as the Hujjaj, as the remaining Hujjaj do, except making Tawaf. Except do not make Tawaf until you are pure, until you are in a state of ritual purity. So no, they should not make Tawaf if they have not done, or if the menses comes on before Tawaf al-Ifadah. Then you can go to the next part of the question.
However, if she is about to leave Mecca and cannot postpone her journey, she can perform the Tawaf in the unclean state. This is the view held by Sheikh Tahir Wyatt with regard to those who are being forced by circumstances and cannot afford to wait till the period is over. Is this a majority or a minority?
No, it's the opinion that a woman can make Tawaf if she is forced to leave Mecca and she's still on her menses. It is a minority opinion, but it's a strong opinion. Not every opinion that is held by a minority of the schools of fiqh, or a minority of the scholars for that matter, not every opinion that is held by a minority means that it is invalid or that it's not strong. And this issue here, Wallahu A'lam, was dealt with in some detail in previous lesson. And the correct opinion, inshallah ta'ala, is that opinion. And that is that if she is forced to leave Mecca, meaning that some women come with groups that are leaving, her menses comes on, for example, on the 9th. And it's not going to go off until the 15th or the 16th. And the group is leaving on the 14th. And she has to leave with the group. She has to leave with the group. Regulations of the country or whatever. If she does not perform tawaf al-ifada, then that means that her hajj is incomplete. She is still in the state of ihram. Yani, not full ihram, but she has not been fully released from ihram. She has only experienced a minor release from ihram known as a tahallul al-awwal. And so if she's married, then she cannot have any relations with her husband until she can come back to Mecca. When can she come back to Mecca? Maybe next year, maybe 2 years later, maybe 3 years later. Maybe never. Her hajj is not complete. And so as a result, some of the scholars have mentioned, and that is, as the questioner wrote, that is the opinion of Sheikh Tahir rahimahullah ta'ala. It's likewise the opinion of the author of this book, Sheikh Aziz bin Baz rahimahullah, and other scholars, many other scholars as well, but it's still a minority opinion that she can, at this point, put on whatever feminine product that she would normally use to protect her clothes from the blood, and she makes tawaf. That she makes tawaf, and that the tawaf is valid. The same way that someone who cannot make wudu, nor can they make tayammum, perhaps because they are bound, for example. They're a prisoner of war, they're tied up, but salat comes in, and they don't have wudu, and they can't make wudu, and they can't make tayammum, they still pray, just as they are, and that prayer is accepted from them. Because they do not have the ability to fulfill the condition of tahara for salat, of being in a purified state for salat. So likewise, this woman does not have the ability to wait. It's outside of her control. She has no ability whatsoever. She has to leave with the group. And so therefore she performs tawaf as she is, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
Ahsanallahu ilayk. I heard that you can make ihram from the Prophet's house, which is now a library. Is it true?
The Prophet's house is a library now? Is that what the question is there?
Yeah, that's what it says.
In any event, the ihram is to be made from the miqat. And when the scholars talk about ihram, they're not talking about putting on the garments. They're not talking about the garments. The garments can be put on anywhere. In the hotel here, you can, make take a ghusl and prepare yourself for ihram, put on the garments. But ihram itself, which is the intention of entering the rites, is to be made from the miqat. It's to be made from the miqat, as the Prophet ﷺ did. As for making ihram from the house of the Prophet ﷺ, which is not a library, it is where the Prophet ﷺ was buried, because it is the sunnah of all of the anbiya that they are buried wherever they die. And the Prophet ﷺ passed in his home, so he was buried in his home. It is not the sunnah to make ihram from the grave of the Prophet ﷺ or his home.
While in Medina, can one refer to the Prophet ﷺ as Ya Rasulullah?
I don't understand what they mean, refer to him.
I think what they mean is when you go to the Prophet ﷺ's grave, can you say Assalamu alaikum Ya Rasulullah?
Yes, when you go to the Prophet ﷺ's grave, you say Assalamu alaikum Ya Rasulullah wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And then you move to the right, Assalamu alaikum Ya Abu Bakr wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum, then move to the right, Assalamu alaikum Ya Umar wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is what Abdullah ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhu would do when he would visit the grave of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Abu Bakr and his father. And that would not be something that he would do often, but he was known to do that upon returning from a journey. So yes, it is permissible to do so in the same way that a person, when he visits the graves, he says Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, Ahl al-Diyar. Yani he gives salams to the inhabitants of the grave, addressing them directly.
Ahsanallahu ilayk. Is it sufficient to recite the Talbiyah on the 8th, 9th, and 10th if I don't know any du'as?
In any event, all of the statements that a person makes on the 8th, the 9th, and the 10th are sunnah. Yani, in other words, if a person didn't say anything whatsoever, then the Hajj would still be valid, provided that they had the intention in the heart on the morning of the 8th. We'll finish after the event, inshallah. The Talbiyah. So, all of the statements that are made on the 8th and on the 9th, these are sunnah. Yani the Talbiyah in and of itself is not something that is wajib, nor is there any dua that is wajib for one to make when he is on Arafah. However, Arafah is a time of begging Allah Azza wa Jalla. Yani for a person who makes Talbiyah, there's no harm in doing so. This is something that is even though it wasn't recorded that the Prophet ﷺ said so. Some of the companions, including some of the Khulafa al-Rashideen, did make Talbiyah while on Arafah, because it is a time for both dua and dhikr. But a person, most of the Muslims memorize رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ. And if you memorize, you don't need to memorize it in English, as long as you come with the meaning. Oh, our Lord, give us the good of this life, the good of the hereafter, save us from the punishment of the fire. Yani these type of things that a person can say that is comprehensive, to say when he is on Arafah, also Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar. All of these things are fine, and inshallah ta'ala, tomorrow, the author is going to mention in the book, tomorrow inshallah ta'ala, there are many different types of du'as and adhkar that the author will mention, and bi'idhnillahi ta'ala will also have a book of adhkar and du'as that will be passed out bi'idhnillahi ta'ala for those who want to benefit from the authentic du'a and adhkar that are narrated on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then you can take that book with you, and you can memorize some of them on the 8th day, and you can use the book itself on the 9th day if you want to read from it. There's no harm in reading the dua itself off of a piece of paper, provided that it is coming from the heart. This is the issue. Yani that it is not just lip service, a person just reading off dua, but that he understands what he's saying is that he's sincerely asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what it is that he mentions in the dua. So, again, if a person only says the Talbiyah, then the Hajj is still valid, but I don't think that that's necessary. I don't think that there will ever be a time when that is necessary for someone only to say the Talbiyah.
Ahsanallahu ilayk. A woman that wears niqab, does she have to remove it in Masjid al-Haram? And how does she cover her face?
She doesn't have to, you said in al-Masjid al-Haram?
That's what it says.
No, she doesn't have to remove her niqab in al-Masjid al-Haram. But a woman who is in the state of Ihram cannot wear the niqab. Because the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لَا تَنْتَقِبُ الْمَرَأَةُ الْمُحْرِمَةُ وَلَا تَلْبَسُ الْقُفَّازَيْنِ. That the muhrima, the woman who has assumed the state of Ihram, does not wear a niqab, nor does she wear gloves. How is she to cover her face? She's to cover her face the same way that the believing women at the time of the Prophet ﷺ covered their faces when they were in Ihram, and that is to pull down the khimar. And so they are wearing something that is above or affixed to the head, the khimar, and they drape it over the face, and this is how they are to cover the face.
I have prayed Salatul Istikhara about a certain affair. How do I know when it's answered? Or what do I do? How many times do I pray?
Now, Salatul Istikhara, the Prophet ﷺ encouraged a person who is uncertain about something that they want to do that is not ibadah. This is key to know. You don't make Salatul Istikhara for issues of ta'ah, issues of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, you don't make istikhara to make hajj. Hajj is binding upon you. So you may make istikhara to determine who you're going to perform hajj with, what day you're going to leave, yes, but in terms of hajj itself, then no. So if a person makes istikhara, and they also, another point here is that it's a good thing for a Muslim to make istishara as well. That is to consult people that they are close with, whom they respect their religious opinion about things. If a person makes istikhara, then they go and do whatever they feel comfortable with. And they should not be waiting for a sign or a dream or something to fall out of the sky or something like that. That is not something that the Prophet ﷺ informed us about. You simply make istikhara and then you put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. And once you are determined to do that thing, then put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as Allah mentions in the Quran.
How many stones do you use to stone the jamarat?
Each jamarat you stone 7 times.
In one of your previous lessons, you said for the one who has intercourse before the minor release from his ihram, his hajj is void, and he must slaughter a camel. Is this for the male and female? And must it be a camel? Could it be a cow or an animal or a similar animal? Also, you said he must make Hajj at the closest convenience. If it was not his first Hajj, must he make Hajj again?
As for the first part of the question, that is, do both the male and the female have to slaughter a cow? Yani that is, the male and female who had intimate relations before at-tahallul al-awwal, yani that is before the minor release on the day of al-Nahr, the 10th day. So at some point during Ihram, the man and his wife had sexual intercourse, and they both have to slaughter a camel, both of them, if she was in compliance, meaning that she was not forced to do so. So if she was in compliance, then yes, she likewise has to slaughter a camel. And that is what the scholars have mentioned, that it is a al-badan, yani badan is a camel. However, many of the scholars also mentioned that the camel, that the cow takes the place of a camel. As for other than that, from the animals, then no. So it either has to be a camel or a cow. What was the other part of the question? Now, if it was not the first Hajj that they have made, do they still have to perform Hajj again? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. Because Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran, وَأَتِمُّ الْحَجَّ وَالْعُمْرَةَ لِلَّهِ. Complete the Hajj and Umrah for Allah. So once one has assumed Ihram, there are only two ways to come out of Ihram. Either complete the rites, or one is considered to be muhsar, which we talked about. That is, he has been prevented from completing the rites. Like the Prophet ﷺ and his companions on Hudaybiyah. They were prevented from going to the Kaaba. So what did they do? The Prophet ﷺ and his companions, they slaughtered their animals and then they cut their hair. So there's only two ways to come out of Ihram. The only two ways to come out of Ihram, either complete the rites or slaughter and cut their hair. As for this person, they have not completed the rites because they rendered the rites null and void by having intercourse during Ihram. So they have to come back, even if it wasn't the first Hajj. They still have to come back and do another Hajj at the earliest possible time.
So what if it was after the first, if it was after the first tahallul?
If it was after the first tahallul, then the Hajj is not considered null and void. However, they are sinful for doing so because it is haram. And they have to make tawbah to Allah Azza wa Jal, and likewise they have to slaughter a cow or a camel or a cow, according to some of the Sahaba, and others say a sheep.
Someone said that the first 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah are the best days of the year. Is this true? When does Dhul-Hijjah begin?
And now, the Prophet ﷺ was the one who said that the best 10 days of the year are the first 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah. Today is the 29th of Dhul-Hijjah. And according to the calendar, tomorrow is the first of Dhul-Hijjah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So, we should, in these 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah, strive in obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ما من أيام العمل فيهن خير وأحب إلى الله من العمل في هذه العشر. أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم, that there are no days where righteous actions are more beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than the righteous actions that are done in these 10 days, meaning the first 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was asked, "Wal jihad fi sabilillah?" And not even jihad in the cause, for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the path of Allah. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Wal jihad illa rajulun yukhatiru bi nafsihi wa malihi wa lam yarji' bi shay." Even jihad, except for a man who goes out and puts his life and his wealth upon the line, and he doesn't return with anything. So the righteous actions that are done in these days are like no other days of the year. And some of the scholars of the past were asked, from amongst them Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala and others, were asked, are the first 10 days of Dhul-Hijjah better than the last 10 days of Ramadan? And the answer is yes.